I don't necessarily think that originality is a prerequisite for a good game. Tropes are usually tropes for a reason, and it can sometimes be prudent to stick to them to a certain extent, so you don't risk completely alienating your potential fanbase. However, on the same spectrum, you do want games to have at least a couple of things about them that make them stand out. There's little point in cloning an already successful concept if you're wanting any kind of longevity, unless you can bring something new to the table. It's sometimes a fine line to tread for a developer. Dive Alert certainly feels like an original style of RPG when you first begin the game. There's no wandering about towns or overworlds, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, much of your interaction with the game comes in the form of submarine combat. The storyline broaches a topic that is perhaps more common in movies than video games, although things like Fallout have explored similar post-apocalyptic themes to great effect. Sirius B, a white dwarf star in the Canis Major constellation, goes supernova, which has a devastating effect on the Earth. The energy flash caused the polar ice caps to melt and sea levels to rise to the point where the only habitable land masses are now minuscule. Don't worry folks, both Sirius A and B are not nearly at that point yet, and if they did go boom, the rising sea levels would be quite low on our list of worries, believe me. I'd be more concerned with the fact that most of our atmosphere would be blown away into space, with the side of the Earth facing the blast basically sterilized as soon as the encroaching nebula hits us. But I digress, this is a fictional video game, so let's go with it. Anyway, this highly exclusive landmass is, as you'd expect, quite cramped, and so only the elite are allowed to live there. Everyone else from the decimated human population is resigned to life in submersible ships. As if that wasn't bad enough, there are a bunch of robots and stuff trying to wipe out all the survivors. But if a human can kill enough of them, they might just be allowed to live on Terra. Two versions of the game might lead you to believe that this has some sort of trading mechanic, a la Pokemon or something, but that's not really the case. In fact, there aren't too many differences between the two, and I'm not overly convinced that two different versions were even necessary here. Whether you choose Becky's version or Matt's version dictates who you play as your protagonist, and also who your robot companion is. There are a few minor dialogue changes too, but otherwise nothing notable really. The game relies heavily on customization, with a large part of your activities revolving around earning money to upgrade and rebuild your ship by carrying out missions. These come in two types: navigation or N missions and strike or S missions. N missions focus on exploration and travel, whereby you must navigate the submarine through different ocean sectors, often with the goal of reaching a specific location while managing fuel and dangers. These missions are more about survival and movement rather than combat. S missions are combat focused, where the player must engage enemy submarines, or sometimes monsters, and the goal is usually to defeat specific targets in battle, making these missions more action oriented and requiring strategic use of weapons and machine upgrades. S missions provide you with a chance to grind money or parts, because they don't really contribute to the game's storyline, whereas the navigation missions are what you'll undertake when you want to push the story along. I will warn you here that one of Dive Alert's biggest drawbacks is its overwhelming amount of text and unskippable cutscenes. The game is packed with lengthy dialogue sequences that drag on before and after missions, often interrupting the flow of gameplay. While the story and world building are ambitious, the sheer volume of text can make progression feel really slow and tedious, especially when conversations meander with unnecessary exposition. With no way to speed through or skip these scenes, players are forced to sit through every exchange, making repeated playthroughs, or even just retrying a mission, frustratingly time-consuming. This pacing issue significantly impacts the game's overall experience, making it feel more like a visual novel with occasional submarine battles, rather than an action-focused RPG. Also, can we address why they've used a font where every lowercase n looks like an H? It's very distracting. When actually in a battle sequence, everything is viewed through a sonar scanner, not the most impressive graphical choice they could have made, let's be real, and your movement is impossible to gauge unless there are enemies or any collectibles in the vicinity. Even then, it's agonizingly slow, with forward momentum reduced to basically a crawl, and rotation being imprecise and clunky. At least you'll have a good while to admire those torpedoes coming towards you that will hit you. You can ascend or descend in the water by managing your dive command or by ejecting ballast to quickly come up, which can help to avoid some enemies that don't descend. However, the functions for doing this are on the same menu choice as your weapons for some reason. The whole navigation and combat mechanic is just rubbish and almost inaccessible until you get to grips with it. Even once you are used to it, it never feels intuitive or natural in any way. Navigating towards targets without running out of fuel is also tough, as your destinations are merely vaguely represented with an arrow pointing in a rough direction, with no indication as to how far away it is or how fast you're going. Literally everything in this part of the game needed work. Everything from the view screen to the information gauges and even simply driving the submarine around doesn't feel right. Honestly, while Dive Alert certainly has some fans and it's for sure a noteworthy game to talk about, I simply have to declare that I really do not like it. The world building is ambitious for sure, but players don't want to sit through hours of exposition in between missions. It's not needed. The levels themselves desperately did need variation, and anything related to the gameplay is sadly just not very good. A rare Neo Geo Pocket Color misfire, it has to be said.